My name is Naomi, and I am 32 years old. I used to believe that marriage was the safest place in the world, a shelter where I would always be loved and valued. That belief shattered on a cold November night at my husband's company party, when he hid me away like a dirty secret he was ashamed of. But that same night, a stranger walked straight toward me, looked into my eyes, and said something that changed everything. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If stories about finding your strength when everything seems lost speak to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to that unforgettable evening. To understand how I ended up sitting alone in a dark corner of a luxury hotel ballroom, you need to know who I was before Derek came into my life. I grew up in a small town outside of Chicago, the kind of place where everybody knew your name, and your grandmother's maiden name too. My parents worked hard to give me opportunities they never had. My father drove a delivery truck for 30 years, and my mother cleaned houses until her knees gave out. They taught me that hard work and determination could take you anywhere, and I believed them with every fiber of my being. After graduating from Northwestern with a degree in marketing, I landed a job at one of the most prestigious advertising agencies in downtown Chicago. I started as a junior associate fetching coffee and organizing meeting rooms, but within 3 years, I had worked my way up to become a marketing strategist. I was the youngest person to ever hold that title at the firm. My ideas were bold, my presentations were flawless, and my campaigns generated millions in revenue for our clients. I loved the rush of brainstorming sessions, the thrill of pitching to executives, the satisfaction of watching a strategy I created come to life across billboards and television screens. That was the woman I was when I met Derek at a networking event 5 years ago. He was charming in a way that felt almost too perfect. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room, like everything you said was fascinating and important. He remembered details about our conversations that even I had forgotten. He sent flowers to my office just because it was Tuesday. He told me I was brilliant, beautiful, and destined for greatness. We dated for 8 months before he proposed, with a 2-carat diamond ring at the top of the Willis Tower, the Chicago skyline glittering beneath us like a carpet of stars. I said yes without hesitation, because I thought I had found my partner, my equal, my forever person. The changes started small after we got married. Derek would make little comments about my outfit, suggesting that a skirt was too short or a blouse was too revealing for a married woman. He questioned why I needed to stay late at work when I had a husband waiting at home. He wondered out loud why I laughed so much when talking to my male colleagues, asking if there was something going on that he should know about. I dismissed these as signs of love, telling myself that he just cared about me and wanted to protect me. I adjusted my behavior to ease his concerns because that is what good wives do, right? They compromise. They accommodate. They keep the peace. After 2 years of marriage, Derek sat me down one evening and said he thought it was time for me to leave my job. He painted a beautiful picture of our future, a cozy home filled with the laughter of children, home-cooked meals every night, a wife who was always there to support her husband's career. He said my job was too demanding, too stressful, and that it was taking a toll on our relationship. He promised he would take care of everything financially. All I had to do was trust him. I handed in my resignation the following week. My boss tried to convince me to stay, offering a raise and a more flexible schedule, but I had already made up my mind. I was going to be the perfect wife, the kind of woman my mother never had the chance to be, because she was always too busy working. The first few months of unemployment felt like a vacation. I redecorated our apartment, tried new recipes, started a small herb garden on the balcony. But the children Derek had talked about never came. Every time I brought up starting a family, he found an excuse to delay. The timing was not right. His career was at a critical point. We needed to save more money first. Meanwhile, my world kept getting smaller. Derek did not like my friends from work saying they were a bad influence and probably talked behind my back. He thought my college roommate was too wild and would give me ideas about leaving him. My cousin who lived nearby was too nosy and always asking questions about our marriage. One by one, the people in my life faded away until Derek was the only person I talked to most days. Without a job, I had no income of my own. Derek gave me a credit card for household expenses, but he reviewed every statement with a magnifying glass. A coffee with a friend became an interrogation about who I met with and what we discussed. A new dress from the sale rack was criticized as wasteful spending. I started to feel like a child asking her father for permission to exist. The criticism of my appearance grew sharper with each passing month. Derek would pat my stomach and ask if I had been eating too many snacks. He would look at old photos from our dating days and sigh, saying he missed how thin I used to be. He compared me unfavorably to the young women at his office, describing their fitness routines and fashionable clothes in loving detail, while glancing at me with disappointment. I began to see myself through his eyes, and what I saw was a failure. I was not the brilliant strategist anymore. I was not the ambitious go-getter who conquered the corporate world. I was just a housewife who could not even keep her husband's attention, whose greatest achievement each day was figuring out what to cook for dinner. When Derek mentioned the annual company party coming up in November, I felt a spark of excitement for the first time in months. This was my chance to dress up to be around other adults, to have conversations about something other than grocery lists and cleaning schedules. Maybe I could meet some of the people Derek worked with and finally feel like a normal human being again. I spent the entire week leading up to the party preparing. I pulled out a navy blue dress from the back of my closet, a beautiful piece I had bought for a client presentation back in my working days. It needed some alterations since I had lost weight from the anxiety of living under Derek's constant scrutiny, but I stayed up late every night making it perfect. I practiced doing my makeup, watched tutorials on how to style my hair, even rehearsed conversation starters in the mirror. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was looking forward to something. The evening of the party arrived with a crisp, autumn chill in the air. I spent 3 hours getting ready, carefully applying my makeup, curling my hair into soft waves, slipping into the navy dress I had worked so hard to alter. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a glimpse of the woman I used to be, confident and polished and ready to take on the world. I walked downstairs to where Derek was waiting, my heart fluttering with anticipation. This was going to be a wonderful night. I would meet his colleagues' charm, his bosses show everyone what a supportive and accomplished wife he had. Maybe this party would be a turning point for us, a reminder of why we fell in love in the first place. Derek looked up from his phone as I descended the stairs. I watched his eyes move from my hair to my face to the dress I had spent hours perfecting. I waited for the compliment, the smile, the acknowledgement of my effort. Instead, his lip curled slightly. "That dress makes your hips look wide," he said flatly, "but I guess we do not have time for you to change now. Just try not to eat too much at the buffet, okay?" The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt all the excitement drain out of my body, replaced by a familiar shame that had become my constant companion. I mumbled an apology and followed him to the car, already feeling small and invisible. In the car, Derek reviewed the rules for the evening. Do not talk too much because you tend to ramble when you are nervous. Do not drink any alcohol because you always say embarrassing things after a glass of wine. Do not follow me around all night because I need to network with the executives and you would just be in the way. Stay near the back of the room and try not to draw attention to yourself. I nodded silently, watching the city lights blur past my window. In my head, I heard my mother's voice telling me that a good wife supports her husband, that marriage requires sacrifice, that you do not air your dirty laundry in public. I had been raised to be accommodating, to smooth over conflicts, to put the needs of others before my own. So I swallowed my hurt and prepared to do exactly what Derek asked. The party was held at the Grand View Hotel, one of the most luxurious venues in the city. As we walked through the gilded doors, I was overwhelmed by the grandeur of the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white linen. A jazz band played softly in the corner, while servers in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Men in expensive suits mingled with women in designer gowns, their laughter and conversation creating a sophisticated hum throughout the space. I felt immediately out of place. My homemade alterations on a 5-year-old dress seemed pathetic compared to the couture surrounding me. I touched my hair self-consciously, suddenly certain that my styling looked amateurish and cheap. Derek scanned the room and spotted a group of colleagues near the bar. His entire demeanor transformed. The tight jaw and critical eyes softened into an easy smile as he raised his hand in greeting. Without even glancing at me, he started walking toward them. I moved to follow, but he stopped abruptly and turned around. "Actually, why do not you find somewhere to sit?" he said in a low voice. "There is a table over by the kitchen. I will come find you later." "By the kitchen?" I repeated, confused. "But Derek, this is your company party. Should not I meet your colleagues?" His expression hardened. "I already told them you were not feeling well and probably would not make it tonight. It would look weird if you suddenly showed up and started introducing yourself. Just wait over there and stay out of trouble." Before I could respond, he was gone, swallowed into the glittering crowd. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My own husband had told his coworkers I was not coming. He had planned from the beginning to hide me away, like an embarrassment he needed to manage. I found the table he had mentioned a small two-top tucked into a dim corner near the swinging doors to the kitchen. Every time a server pushed through with a tray of food, I could smell the steam and grease from the commercial ovens. The table had a perfect view of absolutely nothing except a potted plant and an emergency exit sign. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap, feeling like a child sent to the corner for misbehaving. From my isolated spot, I could see the main party continuing without me. I watched Derek laughing with his colleagues, watched him put his hand on the small of a blonde woman's back as he leaned in to hear something. She said watched him accept compliments and shake hands and act like a man who had everything he wanted in life. The blonde woman was someone I had heard Derek mention before. Her name was Megan, and she worked in his department as a junior account manager. From my shadowy corner, I could see why Derek had described her so often. She was young, probably mid-20s, with the kind of effortless beauty that made my altered dress feel even more inadequate. She wore a form-fitting red dress that showed off a figure achieved through hours at the gym, and her laugh carried across the room like wind chimes. I watched Derek watch her. I saw the way his eyes lingered when she turned to talk to someone else. I noticed how he always seemed to find reasons to touch her arm, her shoulder, her back. A cold realization began to form in my chest, something I had been avoiding for months. The minutes crawled by like hours. I sipped water from a glass I had grabbed off a passing tray, too afraid to approach the bar or the buffet and risk Derek's anger. I smiled politely at the servers who passed by, and I am sure they wondered why a guest was sitting alone in the worst seat in the house. At one point, a woman from the party accidentally wandered toward my corner while searching for the restroom. She looked startled to find someone sitting there, as if she had discovered a forgotten piece of furniture. "Sorry I did not see you there," she said before quickly walking away. Her words echoed in my mind. I did not see you there. That was exactly how I felt, invisible, forgotten, hidden away. I thought about the woman I had been 5 years ago, the one who commanded boardrooms and won clients with her intelligence and passion. That woman would never have accepted being shoved into a corner like unwanted luggage. That woman would have walked straight up to Derek and demanded an explanation. That woman had opinions and boundaries and self-respect. Where had she gone? When had I let her disappear, I could feel tears beginning to form at the edges of my eyes, and I blinked rapidly to push them back. If I cried and my makeup smeared, Derek would be furious, another failure to add to the endless list. So I took deep breaths and stared at the potted plant and tried to imagine myself somewhere else, anywhere else. That was when I heard footsteps approaching, confident and purposeful, different from the hurried shuffle of the servers. I kept my head down, assuming it was another lost guest looking for the restroom. The footsteps stopped directly in front of my table. I looked up and found myself staring at a man I recognized only from photographs on the company website. He was tall, at least 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored black suit. His hair was dark brown with hints of gray at the temples, and his eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue that seemed to look straight through pretense and politeness into something more honest underneath. Jonathan Whitmore, the CEO of the entire company, the man whose name Derek spoke with reverent awe, the legendary executive who had built a startup into a billion-dollar empire through sheer vision and determination. He was standing in front of my forgotten little table, and he was looking directly at me. "I have been searching for you," he said, and his voice was warm and genuine, without any of the smooth corporate polish I had expected. I blinked several times, certain I must have misheard. "I am sorry," I managed to stammer. "I think you might have me confused with someone else. I am just here with my husband. He works in your accounts department." Jonathan smiled slightly and pulled out the chair across from me, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "Naomi Wright. Naomi Harris. Before you took your husband's name, it was Naomi Clark." My heart started pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "How do you know my name?" He leaned back in his chair and studied me with an expression that seemed almost wistful. 2 years ago, my company was struggling. We had great products but terrible market positioning. Our brand was inconsistent, our messaging was scattered, and we were losing ground to competitors who were half our size but twice as clever with their marketing. I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "We hired an outside agency to develop a comprehensive rebranding strategy," he continued. "They promised us their best team, their most innovative thinkers, and they delivered beyond anything we could have imagined. The campaign they created for us was brilliant. It repositioned our entire company in the market, clarified our value proposition, and drove a 300% increase in revenue over the following 18 months. It saved my company." I felt something stir in my memory, a distant recollection of late nights and whiteboard sessions, and the exhilaration of solving a complex problem. That campaign. I started, then trailed off. The campaign for tech-forward industries, Jonathan confirmed, and the strategist who developed the core concept, who created the framework that made everything work, was a young woman named Naomi Clark. I have been trying to find her for 2 years so I could thank her personally and offer her a position at my company, but she seemed to have vanished from the industry completely. My throat felt tight. "That was my last project before I resigned," I said quietly. "I got married right after it wrapped up." Jonathan's expression shifted to something like understanding. He did not press for details about why I had left, and I was grateful for his discretion. Instead, he simply said, "The world lost something important when you stepped away. But if there is any chance you might consider coming back, I want to be first in line." For the next half hour, Jonathan and I talked. Not about the party happening around us, not about my husband tucked away in the crowd, but about marketing strategy and brand positioning and the challenges facing companies in the digital age. He asked my opinion on current industry trends, and instead of dismissing my answers or correcting me the way Derek always did, he listened intently and asked thoughtful follow-up questions. I found myself opening up in ways I had not done in years. I shared ideas I had been nurturing in silent strategies I had developed in my head while doing laundry or cooking dinner. I talked about the potential for experiential marketing in the post-pandemic world, about the importance of authentic storytelling in an era of consumer skepticism, about the ways artificial intelligence was changing the landscape of digital advertising. Jonathan nodded along his eyes, bright with interest. "These ideas are exactly what my company needs," he said. "We have good people, but we are missing someone who can see the big picture and chart a course forward. I have been searching for that person for a long time, and tonight I find her hidden away in a corner, and I cannot understand why anyone would want to hide someone like you." His words landed somewhere deep in my chest, in a place that had been cold and empty for years. Someone believed in me. Someone saw value in my thoughts and ideas. Someone was looking at me not as a burden or an embarrassment, but as a talented professional whose contributions mattered. "I want to offer you a position," Jonathan said, pulling a business card from his jacket pocket and sliding it across the table. "Director of Marketing Strategy. Full creative control over your department, competitive salary, and the chance to build something meaningful. I know this is sudden, and I am sure you need time to consider. But please call me on Monday. Let us at least have a conversation." I picked up the card with trembling fingers. The white cardstock felt smooth and real, a tangible reminder that this moment was actually happening. I did not know what to say, so I simply nodded and held the card close to my heart. That was when I noticed the shift in the room around us. Conversations were pausing, heads were turning. The CEO of the company was sitting at the worst table in the venue, engaged in intense conversation with an unknown woman, and people were starting to take notice. I saw Derek across the room, his face pale and his jaw tight. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like fear. For years, he had controlled every aspect of my life. Now, for the first time, something was happening that he had not planned or permitted. He started walking toward us. Derek approached our table with the kind of forced smile that I had seen him use on difficult clients. His eyes kept darting between me and Jonathan, trying to calculate the situation and figure out how to regain control. "Mr. Whitmore," Derek said, his voice pitched slightly higher than normal. "I see you have met my wife. I hope she has not been bothering you." She was not feeling well earlier, which is why I had her sit in a quiet corner. Jonathan stood up slowly, using his full height in a way that seemed intentional. Derek was not a short man, but Jonathan towered over him by several inches. The contrast was striking. "Actually," Jonathan said evenly, "your wife and I have been having the most fascinating conversation. I had no idea you were married to one of the most talented marketing strategists I have ever encountered." Derek let out a nervous laugh. "Marketing strategist Naomi. She used to do some work in advertising years ago, but she has been out of the game for a while now. She is much happier taking care of things at home." I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation. Derek was dismissing my entire career as if it were a hobby I had dabbled in, something unimportant and easily forgotten. Jonathan's expression remained polite, but his eyes had grown noticeably cooler. "Is that so? Because from what I understand, your wife was responsible for one of the most successful rebranding campaigns in recent memory. My company would not be where it is today without her work." Several people nearby had stopped their conversations to listen. I could see colleagues of Derek's exchanging glances, clearly intrigued by this unexpected development. Derek's smile was becoming strained. "Well, that is very flattering, but Naomi knows where her priorities are. She is devoted to our family." He reached out and grabbed my arm firmly. "We should probably get going anyway. Early morning tomorrow." Jonathan looked at the grip Derek had on my arm, then looked at me. His question was silent but clear. "Do you want to go with him?" And in that moment, something shifted inside me. For 5 years, I had done everything Derek asked. I had shrunk myself to fit into the tiny box he had constructed for me. I had accepted his criticism as truth and his control as love. I had forgotten who I was and what I was capable of. But Jonathan Whitmore, a man who had only spent 30 minutes with me, had seen more value in me than my own husband had shown in half a decade. That contrast was impossible to ignore. "I am actually fine," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I am having a conversation right now, and I am not ready to leave." Derek's grip tightened on my arm. "Naomi," he said through clenched teeth, "we are going home." "The woman said she is not ready to leave," Jonathan interjected calmly. "Perhaps you should respect her wishes." Derek's face flushed red. He was not used to being challenged, especially not in front of his colleagues. For a moment, I thought he might make a scene, but he seemed to remember where he was and who was watching. "Fine," he spat. "Stay then. Make a fool of yourself. I am going to get a drink." He released my arm roughly and stalked toward the bar. I rubbed the spot where his fingers had dug in, knowing there would be bruises tomorrow. Jonathan watched him go with an unreadable expression. Then he turned back to me with genuine concern. "Are you all right?" Before I could answer, a small crowd had begun to gather near our table. Derek's colleagues curious about the drama unfolding in front of them. Among them was a man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard who worked in the same department as Derek. "Wait a minute," the man said, looking confused. "Derek told us his wife could not make it tonight. He said she was sick at home." The comment hung in the air like a live wire. More people were listening now, and the whispers were spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. From across the room, I saw Megan break away from a group near the bar and start walking toward us. She was holding 2 glasses of champagne and smiling brightly, clearly unaware of the tension building in this corner of the ballroom. "Derek," she called out as she approached, "I got you a drink. Where did you disappear to?" She reached the edge of our group and stopped, finally noticing the strange energy. Her eyes landed on me, then moved to Jonathan, then back to Derek, who was standing near the bar with a drink of his own. "What is going on?" she asked, her smile faltering. The man with the beard turned to her. "Apparently Derek's wife is here after all. She has been talking to Mr. Whitmore this whole time." Megan's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, then realization, then anger. "Wife," she repeated, her voice climbing. "Derek does not have a wife. He told me he has never been married." The room seemed to hold its breath. I watched Derek's face drain of all color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Everything began falling into place in my mind. The late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to happen more and more frequently, the way he kept me isolated from his work life, never wanting me to meet his colleagues, never bringing me to company events until tonight. He had been hiding me because he was pretending I did not exist, because to Megan and probably others, he was a single man available and unattached. Megan looked at me with wide eyes. "You are his wife." Like legally, I nodded slowly. "For 5 years." A strangled sound escaped from Megan's throat. She turned to Derek, her face contorted with betrayal. "You told me your last relationship ended years ago. You said you were ready to settle down. I thought we were building something real." She threw both glasses of champagne at his chest. The golden liquid splashed across his crisp white shirt and dripped down his expensive suit jacket. The crowd gasped, then immediately began buzzing with shocked commentary. Derek stood there, soaked and speechless, his carefully constructed persona crumbling around him. The smooth charmer, the ambitious rising star, the dependable colleague. All of it was dissolving into something much uglier in front of everyone who mattered to his career. I should have felt satisfaction, or at least vindication. Instead, I felt strangely numb. All those years of self-doubt, all those moments of believing I was not good enough. They had been built on lies. Derek had not hidden me because I was embarrassing. He had hidden me because I was inconvenient and obstacle to whatever fantasies he was pursuing with women like Megan. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and I no longer saw the charming man who had swept me off my feet. I saw a stranger, a liar, a coward. Without planning it, I found myself standing up. The room fell quiet as everyone waited to see what the wife would do. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you, Derek. Thank you for bringing me tonight. I have been living in a fog for 5 years, and you just cleared it away. This has been very illuminating." I turned to Jonathan and extended my hand. "Mr. Whitmore, I will call your office on Monday to discuss that position. I think it is time I got back to doing what I do best." Jonathan shook my hand with a firm grip. "I will be waiting for your call." Then I walked past my soaking wet husband, past the whispering crowd, past the beautiful decorations and the jazz band and the sparkling chandeliers. I walked out of the ballroom with my head held high and my shoulders squared. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like myself again. The November air hit my face like a splash of cold water as I stepped out of the hotel. My hands were shaking and I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, but underneath the shock and adrenaline, there was something else. Relief. Freedom. The terrifying exhilaration of having finally done something for myself. I pulled out my phone and called for a taxi. While I waited, I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I had not called in over 2 years. Harper Williams. She had been my best friend in college, and she had become a divorce attorney after law school. Derek had convinced me to distance myself from her because she asked too many questions about our marriage, but I still had her number saved. She answered on the 3rd ring. Naomi. Her voice was cautious, but warm. "Is everything okay?" "No," I admitted, and my voice cracked slightly. "No, things are not okay. They have not been okay for a long time. I need help." There was a pause. Then Harper spoke with the decisive energy I remembered from our college days. "Tell me where you are. I am coming to get you." 45 minutes later, I was sitting in Harper's apartment with a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands. I had told her everything from Derek's slow campaign of control and criticism to the revelation at the party tonight. Harper listened without interrupting her lawyer's mind, clearly cataloging every detail. When I finished, she set down her own mug and looked at me directly. "Naomi, what happened to you is textbook emotional abuse. The isolation, the financial control, the constant criticism. You are not crazy, and you are not being dramatic. He systematically dismantled your sense of self." I felt tears sliding down my cheeks, but I did not try to stop them. I thought I was the problem. I thought if I just tried harder, was more agreeable, lost more weight. "He wanted you to think that," Harper said gently. "That is how it works. They make you believe you are the broken one, so you never realize they are the ones doing the breaking." She offered me her guest room for the night, and I accepted gratefully. There was no way I could face Derek tonight. Tomorrow, I would need to think about practical matters like collecting my belongings and finding a place to live. But tonight, I just needed to breathe. I did not sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's face when Megan confronted him, the mask slipping away to reveal the stranger underneath. I thought about all the times he had criticized my appearance while apparently pursuing a younger woman behind my back. The hypocrisy was staggering, but mixed with the pain was a growing sense of clarity. The fog Harper mentioned was real, and it was lifting. For the first time in years, I could see my situation from the outside, and what I saw made me sick, but also strangely energized. I had survived. I was still here, and I was finally ready to fight for myself. The next few days were a blur of activity. Derek called my phone, constantly alternating between angry voicemails, demanding that I come home, and pleading messages, begging me to talk things out. I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I worked with Harper to understand my options. She reviewed our financial records and discovered that Derek had been hiding income in accounts I did not know existed. She explained the divorce process in my state and assured me that given the evidence of his infidelity and financial deception, I would be in a strong position. She helped me file the necessary paperwork and took me to retrieve essential belongings from the apartment when she knew Derek would be at work. Walking into that apartment felt surreal. Everything looked the same as when I had left for the party, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. I packed quickly, taking only what was truly mine clothes, personal documents, a few mementos from my parents, the photo albums from before my marriage. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. I did not leave a note. When Monday came, I put on a professional outfit borrowed from Harper and went to meet Jonathan Whitmore at his office. I was nervous, half expecting him to have changed his mind now that the drama of the party had settled. But when I walked into the sleek lobby of his company, I was greeted warmly and escorted to a conference room with a stunning view of the city skyline. Jonathan entered a few minutes later with coffee for both of us and a folder of documents. He did not mention the party, or Derek, or the scene with Megan. He simply sat down across from me and began discussing business. The position he described was even better than I had imagined. Director of Marketing Strategy with a team of 12 reporting directly to me. Full authority over brand positioning, campaign development, and market research. A salary that was nearly double what I had made at my old agency, plus benefits and stock options. And I listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions about company culture and growth projections, and reviewed the offer letter he presented. It was everything a marketing professional could dream of. But some of the old self-doubt crept back in, whispering that I did not deserve this, that I had been out of the game too long, that I would fail. I want to negotiate a few terms, I heard myself saying, and I was surprised by how confident I sounded. Jonathan raised an eyebrow but nodded. Go ahead. I need a dedicated budget for my department that I control directly without needing approval for every expenditure. I need the authority to hire and restructure my team as I see fit, and I want a signing bonus to help me establish myself during this transition. Jonathan studied me for a long moment, and I could not read his expression. Then a small smile crossed his face. Those are reasonable terms, and I agree to all of them. He extended his hand. Welcome to Tech Forward Industries, Naomi. I shook his hand, and this time my grip was firm. I had advocated for myself. I had asked for what I deserved, and the world had not collapsed around me. Starting the new job was both exhilarating and terrifying. I knew that rumors about the party had spread through the company like wildfire. People whispered when I walked by. I could feel eyes following me in meetings trying to figure out who I was and what my story was. But I made a decision early on I would let my work speak for me. I threw myself into understanding the company's current marketing strategy, identifying weaknesses and opportunities. I held one-on-one meetings with each member of my team to learn their strengths and concerns. I developed a comprehensive 30, 60, 90-day plan and presented it to the executive team with the same confidence I had summoned in my old agency days. The work came back to me faster than I expected. Years of strategy and planning had not disappeared during my time away. They had just been dormant, waiting to be awakened. My mind felt sharp and focused in ways I had forgotten were possible. I stayed late reviewing analytics and came in early to prepare for client presentations. Not because anyone demanded it, but because I loved it. I had missed this feeling of purpose and competence. Derek, meanwhile, was not handling our separation well. He showed up at my office building one afternoon demanding to speak with me. Security escorted him out, but the incident was embarrassing. He sent long emails to my work address, alternating between threats and apologies. I documented everything and shared it with Harper for the divorce proceedings. Then one afternoon, a colleague mentioned casually that Derek had been called into HR that morning. Apparently, an audit had uncovered irregularities in his expense reports. Charges for expensive dinners, hotel rooms, jewelry, all filed as client entertainment but actually used for personal purposes. Within 2 weeks, Derek was fired. The company pressed charges for fraud, and he was facing potential criminal prosecution on top of our divorce proceedings. Megan had long since disappeared from his life, apparently uninterested in a man with no job and no money. I heard the news and felt almost nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences, and karma has a way of balancing the scales without requiring my involvement. My divorce was finalized on a Thursday afternoon in late spring. The judge reviewed the evidence of Derek's infidelity and financial misconduct and awarded me the majority of our shared assets. It was a fair settlement, especially considering that Derek's legal troubles had drained most of his savings on attorney fees. I walked out of the courthouse with Harper by my side, both of us squinting in the bright sunshine. It felt symbolic somehow, emerging from the dark courtroom into the light. "How do you feel?" Harper asked. I thought about it for a moment. "Free," I said finally. "Lighter. Like I have been carrying a weight for so long that I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight." She hugged me tightly. "That is exactly how you should feel. You did it, Naomi. You got yourself out." At work, my first major campaign launched the following month. It was an integrated marketing initiative that repositioned the company's flagship product for a younger demographic. The campaign was bold and creative, incorporating social media influencers, interactive experiences, and a messaging strategy that emphasized authenticity over corporate speak. The results exceeded even my optimistic projections. Sales increased by 47% in the first quarter. Brand awareness among the target demographic tripled. Industry publications featured the campaign as a case study in effective market repositioning. Jonathan presented the results at the annual shareholder meeting and publicly credited my leadership for the success. As the months passed, my confidence continued to rebuild. I went to therapy to work through the trauma of my marriage and learn to recognize the patterns of emotional abuse that had controlled my life. I started exercising again, not to lose weight for someone else's approval, but because it made me feel strong and capable. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed out of my life by Derek's jealousy. I rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a coffee shop on the corner. For the first time in my adult life, I decorated a space entirely according to my own taste. I chose bright colors and comfortable furniture and filled the shelves with books I actually wanted to read. Every morning I woke up in a home that felt genuinely mine, and every evening I returned to a place of peace and solitude. Jonathan and I maintained a strictly professional relationship despite what some gossips at the company liked to speculate. I learned that he had been happily married for 15 years to a woman named Patricia, who worked as a pediatric surgeon. They had 2 teenage daughters and a golden retriever named Winston. Jonathan had never given me any indication that his interest in me was anything other than professional, and I respected him immensely for that. It was nice, actually, to work with a man who valued my mind without any ulterior motives. It reminded me that not everyone was like Derek. Some people saw talent and wanted to nurture it, not exploit it or control it. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I was promoted to Vice President of Marketing. At the celebration dinner, Jonathan gave a toast acknowledging my contributions to the company's growth. He mentioned the night of the annual party when he had finally found the brilliant strategist he had been searching for hidden away in a corner, like a secret the company almost never discovered. I blushed at the attention, but also felt a deep sense of pride. I had earned this. Not through connections or favors, but through hard work and talent and determination. The woman who had sat in that dark corner a year ago, invisible and ashamed, would barely recognize the person standing in this room, accepting congratulations from colleagues who respected her. When I got home that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony watching the city lights twinkle below. I thought about Derek, who I had heard was working a low-level sales job in a different state, his reputation in tatters. I thought about Megan and the other women he had probably deceived over the years. I thought about my parents, who had never lived to see their daughter reclaim her potential, and I felt at peace. Not because Derek had suffered, but because I had stopped suffering. I had broken free from a prison I had not even recognized as a prison. I had remembered who I was and what I was capable of. A year has passed since that party at the Grandview Hotel. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Other times, it feels like yesterday. I am still working at Tech Forward Industries, still finding joy in the creative challenges of marketing strategy. My team has grown from 12 to 23 people, and we have won several industry awards for our campaigns. I was recently invited to speak at a national marketing conference about my approach to brand storytelling, and I stood on that stage and shared my ideas with hundreds of people who actually wanted to hear them. The healing process has not been linear. There are still days when I hear Derek's voice in my head, criticizing and diminishing and doubting. There are still moments when I catch myself seeking approval from others before trusting my own judgment. Therapy has helped me understand that these patterns were built over years and will take time to fully dismantle. But the good days far outnumber the bad ones now. I have learned to recognize my worth without needing external validation. I have surrounded myself with people who lift me up instead of tearing me down. I have built a life that reflects my values and priorities, not someone else's idea of who I should be. The most important lesson I learned from my experience is this: love should never make you feel small. If someone consistently criticizes you, isolates you from friends and family, controls your finances, and makes you doubt your own perceptions, that is not love. That is abuse, wearing a mask that sometimes looks like love. And you deserve better. I also learned that you are never too old or too out of practice to reclaim your life. I was 32 years old, 5 years removed from my career, convinced that my best days were behind me. But talent does not expire. Intelligence does not disappear just because you have not used it for a while. The skills and abilities that made me successful were still inside me, waiting for the chance to emerge again. And sometimes opportunity knocks in the strangest places. Mine came in the form of a CEO who walked across a crowded ballroom to find a woman hidden in the shadows. He did not save me. He simply opened a door. I was the one who found the courage to walk through it. Now, sitting on my balcony with my morning coffee, I watch the sun rise over the city and feel genuinely grateful for everything that happened. Not grateful for the pain, but grateful for the growth that came from surviving it. Grateful for the clarity that emerged from the confusion. Grateful for the woman I have become, who is stronger and wiser and more compassionate than the woman I was before. I do not know what the future holds. Maybe I will fall in love again someday with someone who sees me as a partner rather than a possession. Maybe I will start my own company or write a book or travel the world. The possibilities feel endless in a way they did not when my world was confined to Derek's approval. What I know for certain is this: I will never again allow myself to be hidden. I will never again believe that I am not good enough. I will never again shrink myself to make someone else feel bigger. I am Naomi. I am 33 years old, and I am exactly where I am supposed to be. If you have experienced something similar, if you have felt invisible or controlled or made to believe you are less than you are, please know that you are not alone. Your story is not over. You have the power to write a new chapter even when it feels impossible. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had someone try to hide your light only for you to shine brighter than ever? What gave you the strength to reclaim your worth? Please share your story below and let us support each other on this journey. If this video resonated with you, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps other people find these stories who might need to hear them. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future videos, and share this with someone who might be going through something similar right now. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Whatever you are facing, I hope you find the courage to step out of the shadows and into the light that has been waiting for you all along. Take care of yourself. You are worth it, and I will see you in the next video.